Worth Your Weight in Gold, Episode 3 Putting Your Heart into Your Dreams. Understanding and monitoring your heart rate during exercise can give you amazing insights into your general health and performance. Note of caution. Advice in these podcasts are from my own personal experience and do not constitute professional advice. Everyone's experience and ability is different. Before starting on any new physical activity, it is a good idea to consult a doctor. It may also be beneficial to work with a coach or guide to develop the necessary skills to support such activity. We were still in the early stages of our ascent out of Glencoe when we made our first brief stop. My watch had beeped and vibrated to let me know that my heart rate was approaching max heart rate. As soon as we stopped and took in the amazing scene around us, my heart rate began to drop. Within a few minutes, I heard another beep which told me it had dropped by 30 beats per minute, BPM. That would give me ample time to work before we had to stop again. Soon we were off and ascending the steep rocky path above Glencoe. Measuring heart rate. Even with a healthy heart, there are still a few things it's good to know about your heart as you start your journey into training. It's definitely worth the investment of getting a smartwatch or some device with which you can accurately measure your heart rate during and after training. Of course, it's also possible to physically measure your pulse if you do not have a device. If manually measuring your pulse rate, I would recommend measuring for a full minute while standing still. You can find out more information on how to measure your pulse online. In order to make sense of your heart rate, there are some rates that you should become familiar with. The basic two are resting heart rate and maximum heart rate. Resting heart rate. Resting heart rate, sometimes known as resting pulse, is your heart rate when you are stationary and relaxed. It is best measured just after you get up in the morning, as even just wandering round the house or the office may raise your heart rate somewhat. As it varies dependent on age, gender and general fitness level, it would be very difficult to say any rate is good or bad. You can find out more information online, but at this stage it is enough just to know what it is when you're in good health. Your resting heart rate can give you an idea of your fitness level for your age and gender. In very general terms, fitter people tend to have lower resting heart rates. Taking your resting heart rate regularly can also give an indication of your health. Noticing an unexplained rise in resting heart rate can be an early indication that you're becoming unwell. In my case, colds and stomach bugs have been predicted by a rise in resting heart rate. Max heart rate, MHR. Max heart rate, MHR, or max pulse rate, MPR, as it is sometimes known, is the maximum heart rate that you should work up to when exercising. The rule of thumb to calculate it is to subtract your age from the figure 220. I am 53 years old, so in my case my MHR is 167, 220 minus 53 beats per minute, BPM. When I am exercising, I should try and avoid allowing my heart rate to exceed 167 BPM, and when it reaches this level, I should try to slow down a little in order to let it drop. Even without measuring my heart rate, it's easy to tell when it is at or around MHR. I feel breathless, anxious, and my brain is generally screaming at me to stop whatever physical activity has taken my heart rate to this level. I normally want to slow down as much as I need to slow down. Whether exercising or not, when we are stressed or anxious, we enter into a cycle which tends to increase our heart rate. Sensing danger, our brain releases adrenaline to prime our body for action. Our breathing becomes quick and shallow and our heart rate starts to rise, which triggers our brain to sense danger, and so the cycle continues. If you are in good health, however, it is possible to control your heart rate simply by reversing that cycle. Slow down. Just like when driving, the first action to slow down is to take your foot off the accelerator. When exercising, the first action you can take to reduce your heart rate is to slow down. If you're running, walk, or if you're walking, stop and sit down if possible. Your heart rate can be reduced further by slowing your breathing. For me, even just 3 slow, deep breaths in and out can drop my heart rate by 10 BPM. Whether you've slowed to a walk, standing still, or sat down, make a conscious effort to slow your breathing, and as your breathing slows and deepens, your heart rate will drop. Another bonus of deep breathing during some form of a rest is that you have a better chance of getting more oxygen down to your legs and thus reducing muscle pain and avoiding cramps. To fine tune your heart rate, it's all about your state of mind. As anyone who practices mindfulness or meditation can tell you, picturing positive images helps release serotonin in the brain, which has the effect of reducing your heart rate, which tells your brain the world is good, and so the cycle repeats. In summary, whenever you become breathless, anxious, and in need of a rest during exercise, this is a good indication that your heart rate may be approaching or at MHR. In order to reduce it, slow down, take slow, deep breaths, and think positive. Taking frequent rests during exercise and applying the techniques I've already mentioned will help you to maintain a healthy margin between your current heart rate and MHR. Maintaining this margin will enable you to work safely and enjoy the activity more. Performance measured through heart rate. Now that you know how to control your heart rate, it's worth looking at some aspects of your heart rate which can tell you about your performance during a physical activity. Heart rate follows pace. When you look at your heart rate and compare it with the pace that you're moving at during a physical activity, it would be quite good to see a correlation. Every time your pace drops from a jog to a walk, for example, you could look to see a corresponding drop in heart rate, perhaps by 20 to 30 BPM. This would show you that you're recovering well from your activities. Steady heart rate over varying terrain. Whether running or hiking over varying terrain, a good practice to remain comfortable and cover long distance is to vary your pace according to the terrain such that your heart rate remains relatively constant. Hence, you can maintain a healthy margin between your current heart rate and MHR. As an example, if you were to ascend a 300-metre hill and then turn around and come back down to the start point, you may find that you ascend somewhat slowly, taking sort of fairly short, steady steps, and descend a good bit faster. Thus, your pace would be quite varied. What you'd be looking for is a relatively steady heart rate, something which stays fairly well away from MHR. If you can maintain that, that would be an ideal margin for endurance activities. Heart rate and altitude. A final subject to touch on while discussing heart rate is to look at the effects on heart rate, respiratory rate, and oxygen saturation, or SpO2, at altitude. Typically above 3,000 metres above mean sea level, our bodies will start to react to the reduced amount of oxygen in the air. This means that our heart rate and our respiratory rate, breaths per minute, may start to rise in order to bring sufficient oxygen in. This means that we need to reduce our physical work rate in order to maintain a healthy margin between our current heart rate and MHR. I found that the importance of maintaining a slow enough pace not to push my heart rate up was absolutely paramount at altitude in order not to feel sick or as if I was going to pass out. Measuring the oxygen saturation in your blood using a device called a pulse oximeter is a great way to see how your body is coping with altitude. At sea level, a healthy person would expect to see levels of around 97% or above. Below 95% would be cause for some concern, and anywhere near 90% and you may want to seek urgent medical attention. At altitude, however, with so much less oxygen in the air, the rate will inevitably drop. On Kilimanjaro, our guides would only let us continue up the mountain as long as our SpO2 level was above 80%. At Gorak Shep on the return from Everest Base Camp, my SpO2 level briefly dropped below 70% and I was suffering a lot of the early symptoms of acute mountain sickness, AMS. Fortunately, we were on our descent, which is the only cure for symptoms of AMS. So that brings us to the end of episode 3 podcast. I hope you found this information helpful and enjoyed the podcast. I hope you're going to stay with us when we get to episode 4. It's a stretch, but you can do it. Where I'm going to talk through many of the stretches that I do on a daily basis or as a warm-up or warm-down from exercise. Thank you for listening till now. Catch you then. Bye.